to the debate over our debt, which is the big debate right now. Senators called back to work after the 4th of July holiday because we're still nowhere close, it doesn't seem at least, to an agreement on the debt ceiling and whether or not to raise it. Republican David Vitter of Louisiana will be one of the senators working next week. You agree with that call, by the way, Senator, that you got to work through the recess to get this done?
I absolutely agree with it. I was part of a core group of conservatives yesterday in the Senate who demanded that. The reason it's happening is because we said we would object to going into recess, to even having a pro forma session. We would object and block that and keep us here. Now, the second key step is we should be here not just to be here, but to be facing the biggest challenge our nation faces, spending and debt. And so the question is, when is Harry Reid going to put an instrument on the floor about spending and debt? He's been avoiding that conversation all year. He's been doing all sorts of cats and dogs, often trivial bills, having nothing to do with that. When are we going to focus on spending and debt?
I'm having a hard time, Senator, whether it's talking to people like you or people behind the scenes or whatever the case may be, figuring out how far the two sides really are apart. I mean, it's easy for us to say, oh, they're nowhere close because you don't have a deal yet. But then at the same time, I start thinking, well, maybe they are pretty close. It's just, getting things worded right and getting the tax breaks worded as not being tax increases, that type of thing. I mean, how close do you think the two sides are right now? How would you characterize it?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think they're close at all. And I think part of the problem is the way this whole situation is set up, with a closed-door negotiation, a backroom negotiation involving only a few people. That can continue, but what has to also happen is a full, open public debate, and that's what we're trying to demand and produce on the Senate floor.
That's probably why it's so difficult to figure it out. Now, the issue of taxes, let's talk about that just for a second, because that appears to be the big sticking point here. Is there any way Republicans would go for something that raised revenue, to use Democratic terminology for a moment, whether it's, taking away certain tax breaks? It doesn't have to be the jets. I know a lot's been made of that the last couple of days, but are there certain tax breaks that would go so the Democrats could say revenue was a part of this, and the Republicans could probably at the same time say, but we didn't increase taxes?
I'll just give you my opinion. Revenue has to be part of the solution, but it should be revenue from growth, not revenue from just jacking up rates. For instance, if we did real tax reform and simplification, you could get rid of a whole lot, most if not all, of deductions and exemptions. But I would use that savings to bring down overall rates, including the corporate tax rate, either the first or second highest in the world. That will produce a lot of new job growth. That will produce new revenue.
But don't you think, I know, getting back to the earlier question, that maybe you guys could be able to figure that out, because that gives both sides a political argument. It fulfills the arguments politically of both sides while still getting a deal done, if you do it the way you just described, doesn't it?
I agree, and the way is to focus on revenue through growth, not tax hikes.
Right. So as long as you keep the rates, or if you lower the rates overall, and I guess my point is, if you lower the rates and you still have more revenue through it, it might seem like net higher taxes on certain groups or companies, but at the end of the day, it's a simpler tax code, and you've solved the deficit problem.
Well, I agree with you. I think we should get rid of most or all of the credits and deductions, loopholes, use that to lower rates dollar for dollar in a static model. But the world and the economy is not static, and that's going to produce a lot more jobs and growth. That'll be good for the economy. It'll also produce revenue to lower the deficit.
Right. All right, Senator Vitter, good to talk to you today. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. Senator David Vitter of Louisiana. Now, this story is interesting. Matching the jobs with